Hey, Mr. Rose, do you know anything about Nelson Mandela?
Of course I know something about Nelson Mandela. He was the president of South Africa. Why do you ask?
Because I have to do a report on Nelson Mandela, and I really don't know much about him. Can you help me out?
I sure can. Well, for starters, did you know that Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison?
27 years in prison? Why, Mr. Rose?
Nelson Mandela was a leader in the African National Congress, and in South Africa they were fighting against apartheid.
What is apartheid?
Apartheid was a way of not giving people who were non-white equal rights in South Africa. They used laws to keep people separated based on race. Nelson Mandela didn't like that.
I still don't understand why he spent 27 years in prison.
Well, at this point in Nelson's life, he was standing up against apartheid and what the government was doing. And they told him he couldn't talk to a lot of people or travel around to talk to them. But Nelson didn't listen, and he ended up getting thrown in jail because the government said he didn't listen. Then, later on, they brought him back on trial for working with other people to overthrow the government. And in 1964, he was found guilty and given life in prison.
So how did he go from being in prison to the president of South Africa?
After spending so many years in prison, Nelson Mandela was seen around the world as someone who stood up against apartheid. After many people spoke out against him being in prison and apartheid, he was finally released in 1990.
So when did he become president?
Nelson Mandela became president of South Africa in 1994, once all the people who were citizens in South Africa were allowed to vote in the election.
That is so cool, Mr. Rose.
If you think that is cool, not only did he become the president of South Africa, but Nelson Mandela was also awarded the Nobel Peace Prize.
Wow, Nelson Mandela did a lot of big things in his life.
That is right. So remember, as a young man, when you grow up, you can be anything you want to be and be a leader too, and make sure you stand up against unfair treatment.